Well, it is 7 o'clock on the head, so we are going to go ahead and start. I'm Chelsea Sigelski from Career and Professional Development, and Rich, do you want to introduce yourself as well?
Absolutely. Rich Marshall from Career and Professional Development as well. Chelsea and I are both leads of the manufacturing, transportation, logistics industry within our office.
Yeah, and we're super excited to have a panel that kind of gives you an idea of manufacturing and breaks down some of the myths that might be in manufacturing or that you might hold to manufacturing. Really give some idea that it's really for all majors, although we're co-sponsoring with the Engineering Club and our Supply Chain Club, because we do know that there's a lot of opportunities for those populations within. So I'm going to ask Hannah if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, your name, your role, the organization that you're representing, and maybe typical internship or entry-level opportunities that you recruit for, and then we'll go to Christina and we'll wrap up with Marion if you want to represent yourself. So that will be our order for this first question of introductions.
Absolutely. I will go ahead and introduce myself. I am Hannah Wampel, currently with Plexus Corp as a supply chain system specialist. I've been there for around a year now, but in the industry for about 6 years. And typically what we recruit for, at least in our supply chain group, can be kind of all over the board, from buyers, supply chain analysts, supply chain interns has been a very popular opportunity in the last year and couple of months, as well as supply chain system specialists, which would be more geared towards the IT fields, and then other, we call them product managers or different customer product management categories as well.
Wonderful, thank you, Christina.
Perfect. So Christina Mothi, I am talent acquisition lead at Amcor. I've been here around, I would say, 3.5, almost 4 years now. And I recruit more so for, I would say, engineering, research and development, supply chain, and then internships on every single function. If it's HR, marketing, finance, supply chain, you name it, we likely have an intern for it. As well as our supply chain rotational program, which is our entry-level program that we hire typically in classes. So every May, we typically hire new graduates, anywhere from 2 to 4 of them, give or take, into the program.
Go ahead, Marion.
All right, good evening, everyone. I'm Marion Rothgale, and I'm the Global Procurement and Supply Chain Manager at Marchand Schmidt in Fond du Lac. So we're a manufacturer of hygienic equipment. And as you heard before, there is internship positions in pretty much any field at our organization. So we have positions in human resources, obviously in different supply chain functions, in engineering, in the research and development group, and specifically in my department, the internships are typically global procurement and supply chain internship positions. And typical positions that we recruit for are buyers, so for different commodities. So that would be a typical entry-level role, commodity buyer, commodity specialist. So those are the typical roles.
Wonderful. You did a great job with all of you introducing yourselves. Now I'm interested in, and you can share. So students, I just want you to have some perspective. We have 2 individuals that are in the industry working within their organizations, so real supply chain professionals that are working in manufacturing. And then we have a recruiter that's recruiting for those types of opportunities. But all have presented that there's opportunities in manufacturing for all of their organizations and all majors. But can you give an idea, and maybe it's even bringing up past positions that you've had, you've alluded to that, or companies that you've worked with, but how has manufacturing changed in the last couple of years? So I think there's sometimes a myth out there that it's dirty, that it's kind of maybe not very classy to work in those organizations or in that industry, but can you give an idea, maybe break down that barrier, break down that myth, and give us an idea of how manufacturing has evolved and changed? So I'm going to go with our specialists first, and then we're going to wrap back up and say, how do you recruit, Christina? So Marion, do you want to give us an idea of how it's changed? Hannah, give your perspective, and then we'll wrap back up with Christina.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, manufacturing being dirty, that's far from reality. I mean, first of all, there's so many different types of roles, and so many different types of functions, and also with just how the industry has changed over the years, and attracting and retaining talent across the board, especially manufacturing companies had to make accommodations in order to provide work environments, workspaces that are pleasant to work in. There's a lot of focus, especially when you think about the people who actually do the manufacturing, right? There has been a lot of accommodations, ergonomics, and employee engagement, and I mean, it's completely different than what it was years ago. And then also in terms of the positions, I have to say that I find manufacturing so fulfilling because you're actually able to see what you produce, and that is really one of the neatest thing that I find about manufacturing, and the transparency that is there. So I think that has been one of the biggest changes for sure.
Wonderful. Hannah, your perspective.
Yes, Marion had a really good point, and to add to that, like he mentioned, manufacturing not only is tangible and you're working with those tangible items that kind of go through a manufacturing site, but it also drives innovation. I think that's been a really big conversation. I mean, in the last 6 years that I've had the opportunities in different, not just industries, but different products and things that you work with. Plexus has been going through a lot of innovation and digitization of not only their manufacturing, but also just their processes in general. So that's hit HR, finance, engineering. It's hit the entire organization, and that changes the entire manufacturing process along the way.
Yeah, so from a very different perspective, from the recruiting perspective, manufacturing has become very technical and, as Hannah said it, innovative. I mean, it's not just wrench turning anymore of what people think it used to be, or those people that went to trade school and that's all they want to do. It's not that anymore. It's very clean. Some of our plants you could probably eat off the floor, and it's probably cleaner than some people's kitchen tables, which is just crazy. But also safe. Also, like I said, it used to be that wrench turning, dirty, greasy type environment, and it's not at all. Things are becoming, as Hannah said again, digitized. Automation is a huge piece of manufacturing now. So some of our new grads actually have more insights to, the systems, the tools, and how we're automating our processes than some of the individuals that have been there 20, 30 years.
Great point, Christina. From a recruiting perspective, we talked about seeing a product being, from start to finish, raw material to being finished, but in manufacturing, what are the other benefits with working within the industry?
Yeah, I would say, honestly, you get such a diverse perspective of individuals. You have some that have master's degrees, PhDs, in R&D, but then, you also have individuals that have just a high school education or less at times. So you're getting to talk with so many different backgrounds that you wouldn't typically get if you were in a, office setting only or non-manufacturing facility.
Marion, Hannah, anything? Oh, go ahead.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that I really enjoy about working in manufacturing is the actual learning that takes place as an individual. I used to work at Mercury Marine, and I had no idea how marine engines work, right? I mean, I have a supply chain degree, and I'm not an engineering degree, but being able to talk to the engineers, understanding the product, and actually learning how the whole system actually works, and learning that has been a tremendous experience, which also is something that you can apply in your actual supply chain role, right? When you're showing your suppliers that you're knowledgeable about the processes, the product, it gives you a lot of credibility too. And that understanding and that learning process is something that I really appreciate.
I agree. And to add to what Marion said as well, I also think it's very exciting at the moment. There's so many different roles and directions that you can go, especially from thinking as a UW Oshkosh student, or even other degrees that you kind of go into, whether you choose to go into an MBA or somewhere else within business. You have so many directions that you're able to go with manufacturing. Not just limited to manufacturing or supply chain, but you can go into so many different realms of IT or even finance and HR, legal. You have so many other things that you can kind of feed off to and learn, just as Marion said before as well.
One of the other benefits I was thinking about, and Marion, you might be able to chat a little bit about this. Well, I'm certain you can chat a little bit about this, and others might too. But what about the global perspective of manufacturing?
Oh, yeah, I was actually saving that point for later in the discussion. But yeah, actually, for me, it started out very early. And when I got my undergrad, or when I was in college, I did my internship at Oshkosh Corporation. And so as an intern, I actually had the opportunity to visit different facilities across the world. So I was able to visit JLG Industries, division of Oshkosh Corp, in China, in Australia, and in New Zealand. So a lot of exposure there early on. Then when I graduated, I took a position with Mercury Marine. I was with Mercury a couple of years, and I had the opportunity to do an expat assignment in Belgium. So I was able to lead the procurement organization for Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And along with that, I had the opportunity to travel to a lot of different places all over the world. I mean, and I literally mean all over the world, to mostly visit suppliers, so across North America, South America, Europe, anywhere between Spain and Lithuania, places in Africa, Asia, Australia, New Zealand, as I mentioned before. So there's a lot of opportunities with that, because a lot of large corporations have facilities worldwide. Even smaller companies like March & Schmidt, the company that I work for, has a plant in the United Kingdom, and there is currently a plant being built in another part of the world. So, and that is actually something that I have the opportunity to be part of as well. So, you know, getting to shape the future on a global scale is something that is really, really exciting.
Go ahead, Hannah. Do you have something to add about the global perspective?
I would say global perspective, very similar to Marion again. I had started out in my internships actually at Pierce Manufacturing and had a lot of lead-ins to JLG and Oshkosh Corp. And just seeing those different areas that you can indeed transfer to, as well as kind of transferring into from engineering into supply chain, moving into a couple of other companies and seeing that not only do you have to travel now either, but you also can get the global perspective virtually as well. So one of the main reasons that I kind of changed throughout some of my different career choices, from Pierce to US Venture, which is also a local company, and then just recently transferring to Plexus, was the talk of the Tariff 301 or the Section 301 tariffs that Trump kind of placed over the US. And with that opportunity, I was able to move to Plexus to be able to manage and mitigate that risk for their customers. So, I mean, there are some of those different experiences and even opportunities that open up with global as well as virtually, because 6 a.m. and also 8 p.m. are a very active day for me to be able to talk to our China and Malaysia, I guess sites you could call them, is what we call them, or factories. So it's not only having to travel, but also now we're able to virtually integrate our lives together and kind of come up with different processes. So to add on to what Marion said, that's a couple of the different reasons why I ended up switching, as well as just different opportunities within different companies and products that they either manufacture or distribute.
Wonderful. Christina, are there opportunities for interns? I'm certain there's opportunities for full-time associates to go abroad or to interact on a global basis. What about internship opportunities for that interaction?
Yeah, so for the meantime, at least for AmCorp, we do not have global opportunities for interns or co-ops. Right now, we recruit specifically for our Flexibles business group, which is all North America based. So we do have interns and co-ops throughout North America. We just have not branched out our scope of our program to global at this point.
Wonderful. Dr. Godfrey asked if and why, and I know Hannah, you touched a little bit about that, about why you changed companies. Marion, do you have anything to add, or Hannah, do you have anything to add to address that specifically? And then students, if you have other questions, feel free to chat those in.
Yeah, for me, I quite honestly almost tumbled a little bit about across a new opportunity. I may actually tell you the whole story. I happened to be in the hospital with my wife, who was in labor and who was giving birth to our son, and I had everybody in the office prepared that I'm going to be out of the office. Don't call me. I will be gone. And I see a Fond du Lac number calling me, which has the same prefix as Mercury Marine, and I was really upset. I almost didn't take the call. And it happened to be a headhunter who was looking for to fill a position to lead the procurement and supply chain organization for a manufacturer in Fond du Lac. So we started those conversations, and I quite honestly wasn't really looking, but then as we talked and as the opportunity was described to lead a department with a company that is growing, as I mentioned, facilities overseas, building facilities overseas, it was a really great opportunity. And I was actually in the process of finishing up my my MBA, so it was, you know, it was the right timing for myself. And it came also with a pretty nice pay raise as well. So.
Anything to add?
Not entirely. I actually, all of my opportunities to change companies were, I mean, not as exciting as his opportunity. I was not giving birth or anything, but I would say honestly, just keeping updating your LinkedIn, keeping connections open, different connections that you do have. I mean, Dr. Godfrey is on this call. I still sometimes chat him, or even some of my supply chain professors at UW Oshkosh. But just kind of keeping that LinkedIn updated as well, because that was one of the ways that I actually had an opportunity open up at Plexus. Was a headhunter had, you know, connected with me and then said, hey, I think you're a great fit for this mitigation of tariff process and kind of that execution. What do you think? So I just always kind of keep my eyes and ears open, my connections open to all those people around me on kind of that next move. I don't try to kind of peg myself in a place. I always try to kind of keep that connection open, and then also keep my relationships nice and fresh, and try not to close any doors when I do end up leaving a different company.
I can definitely echo that for sure. You know, the biggest piece of advice that I have to add to that, what you mentioned, Hannah, is keeping in touch. I mean, I'm sure I still remember to this day it was all about networking in the internship course. I cannot stress enough how important that is, because networking never stops. If you graduate, when you graduate, keeping in touch with your professors, keeping in touch with your peers, networking within the organization, that is equally as important. Building relationships with people across the board is really going to help you find other opportunities, maybe within another area for that company, simply by having that connection with another person, for example, in finance. So networking never stops. That is my number one advice.
I completely agree. And not only within your direct group either. Typically, I also tell people try to at least get one connection from outside of your direct work group so that you do have those connections elsewhere as well. So they might see an opportunity, in finance, like you mentioned, or even somewhere else that they say, hey, this is a good next step for you in your career.
The number one mistake that I see interns is making is not keeping in touch after they have completed their internships. I have seen both. I have seen interns that kept messaging me, kept emailing me, kept in touch, sent me a WhatsApp message, wishing me Merry Christmas, etc. And then I have also had interns that I've never heard from again. I highly recommend just to keep in touch, simply for the sake of having that additional connection that you may benefit from in the future.
Yeah, can't echo that enough, Marion, because when the time comes when you're doing your graduation, if you're looking for a full-time job, we're going to seek out those that did a great job and have stayed connected, rather than the ones that, left and really didn't connect with us after the fact. To us, that says maybe you didn't enjoy your time, maybe you're not interested. We want those that are, proactive and really getting out there and talking with us.
I think Dr. Godfrey asked a great question, and Christina, I'm going to introduce you with a different title this time, but asked about, as a follow-up, what are your experiences been like using LinkedIn? And you touched a little bit on that. And I think students they're writing down, headhunter. Marion got a job through a headhunter. Hannah shared that, right? And students are thinking, where does this come from? Christina, what's your title? Campus recruiter. You're like the headhunter for students, really? So talk about your role and how you're using LinkedIn and how you work to connect and find student talent, because that's truly what a campus recruiter is in regards to where you're looking for that talent.
Yeah, a headhunter is just a fancy title for a recruiter, honestly. But yeah, for our campus team and our campus recruiter and myself, we're using Handshake, we're using LinkedIn. We want to go and seek out students if we haven't got that organic pipeline built in. So LinkedIn, get that updated if we see that a student doesn't have one. It's really hard to always track that down. So update that, have extracurriculars on there. If you can, update your resume and attach your resume on LinkedIn. That is so critical. And then also, I'm just reading the question that Dr. Godfrey had on there of, have recruiters been contacting you on LinkedIn? I'm one of those. I will send people messages all the time for, different positions. And a big piece of advice for any students that are trying to connect with a recruiter, someone, at the company that they're looking to apply for, when you send the request, put a note, put a message in there. That goes such a long way. I have, when I'm looking at LinkedIn right now, 138 requests right now that I have to go through. I'm terrible at that, but if I see that there's a note on that, I'm going to look at that one first over the others.
Hannah, there's a student in here from Michaela, or a comment in here, a question about that from Michaela. When you look at like past interns that you've worked with or other peers that you worked with, what's a very natural way to build a connection with somebody on LinkedIn or to reach out? How do you organically do that, or what's your process for that?
I would kind of stick to the more organic approach. Obviously, I wouldn't try to force a relationship, but you're always going to have those people at work that you just connect to naturally, or who is either a good sponsorship or mentorship. So, I mean, I know sometimes it's kind of crossing, a fine line of what you want to cross on Facebook versus LinkedIn and having that relationship. Some people you might get close enough to say, hey, I'm okay with a Facebook connection, or even a LinkedIn or even email as well. Some people, I mean, obviously, I like to keep my Facebook locked down to certain particular people where I feel comfortable in sharing that information. But to keep it to that organic way, I connect all the time with interns that I've had in the past. Either Facebook, we'll exchange phone numbers, or a LinkedIn, and just kind of send those messages back and forth. In a good example, she mentioned like not something unorganic, such as just season greetings. I like to connect with people a lot of the times with opportunities that I have, either at work or through other connections like Apex. Recently, it's been a lot of virtual conferences, so I'll try to reach out in that direction to say, hey, this is something that I think you would be really interested in or would kind of fit your role in what you're in today. Here's a free link for it. I'm able to give someone a discount for it. That's been a really good way to connect in the last couple months. Or even reaching out and saying, hey, I've had this issue at work. I know you've had experience with this in the past. What are some of the roadblocks that you crossed, or something that you kind of have that conversation to bring out in people? Just kind of, again, reiterating that keeping those relationships open in the first place is really nice, because then you're easily able to go and reach out. Because I mean, that's just who I am as a person. I like to collaborate with people. So I'm constantly reaching out, even if it's not at Plexus, but with other people saying, hey, in my case, I have to build an SSIS package or something else. What kind of programs have you used in the past? What different things are you guys doing? I mean, you don't have to share information that is, I guess, confidential at your company, but kind of keeping those conversations open to kind of discuss that as well.
Great answer, Hannah. Not much I can add to that. Just echo it. One thing that one great example of keeping in touch that I recently came across is we had an intern from UW Oshkosh that sent me a note and asked me, hey, remember that tool that I developed for the shipping process and whatnot? Are you still using it? Have you been able to materialize on that? Just curious how this is going, and if this has indeed helped the company. Super easy, and just shows that you're interested, that you're still connected, and very easy way to just keep in touch, and again, just show that you're interested in the gear.
Exactly. I also think too, one thing that came up in this last year is we're all people, and I think our HR head of HR is really good at telling us that we are people and we do need those connections. So don't be afraid to reach out either and think, oh my gosh, I don't want to reach out to a VP or someone at a higher status either, because a lot of the times I'll just reach out to people where I'm like, hey, that's a position that I really want to move into with my career, and I'll reach out and ask them questions on how they got there, or even, hey, can you review my resume? You have no idea who I am, but what do you think about it? What are things that stand out to you? I know that's very out there, and I'm very, I say I'm introverted. A lot of people at work say I'm not, but I don't like to do that. But I've learned in the past year that is something that kind of puts you apart and also gets you ahead as well within your career.
Hannah, did I really just hear you say that you are still doing informational interviewing and asking for resume reviews after Business 284? That's how it's... Christina, can you talk a little bit about if you have some ways that students are organically kind of connecting, maintaining that relationship with you? But then I'd also like, from your perspective, if you could talk about how a student walks through and moves through kind of the hiring process within manufacturing, maybe the applicant tracking software, how they would build that connection, really apply for those internships within manufacturing.
Yeah, so first on the maintaining relationships, I absolutely loved Marion's thought process of, after your internship, following up to, come back on how a project did. As a recruiter, that's the best way during an interview too, saying this is the project I worked with, and oh, hey, I also followed up with them, even though I wasn't still a co-op with them, and this is the end result. A lot of times internships are short. You only get, 3 months if you're doing a typical summer internship where you're doing projects, and sometimes you have to leave before you come to completion. So absolutely love that idea. I think that goes a long way, both to stay connected with that company, but then for any future interviews you're doing as well. So absolutely love that. Typically how I recommend it as well, or just, getting an email of your supervisor or others that you connected with during that time. You likely had the same exact email format, so you'll likely know how to get in touch with people there too. So just, follow up with an email, see how things went. And then totally switching gears to the, applicant tracking system, how you're going through the process. We've tried to slim it down. Most companies have, I believe we have the same process as Plexus does with Workday. So most companies now, their applicant tracking systems are very seamless. You create an account for most of them, right up front. You're going to apply. You can attach your resume, and it's going to parse your entire resume if you let it, that it's going to fill in most of the boxes for you. Always recommend to students and anyone, not even just students, even some of our higher level applicants, to review what it parses before you click submit, before you click next, because sometimes it pulls things into different boxes. And then when we see it, it's all kinds of crazy, and we're like, this person never even reviewed it. So from there, you're going to apply, and then you're into what we call a requisition. So that's where all of our pool of candidates sit, and then we go through it, select the candidates we want to move forward with, and then you typically get an email back from a recruiter. We'll do a phone screen, so 30-minute, 15-minute phone interview, go through your resume, ask you about yourself, ask if you have questions, and then from there, the interview, which gets a little bit more technical based on the function that you're in. That is pretty typical of manufacturing, of business. Manufacturing, if you're in the manufacturing environment, a plant tour is always something a little bit added that you're going to get in manufacturing other than that. And that's where we love to see, are these candidates asking questions, even if you're in a supply chain function and you're in a plant, ask questions about the process, ask about the systems. You may have no idea what this machine even does, just ask it, because that's showing that you are intrigued and really actively, trying to learn. So I hope that answered the question.
It does. Dr. Godfrey wants to know, do you check Facebook profiles or any other social profiles when hiring a candidate?
I do not. We don't even dip the toes into Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, anything like that. LinkedIn is the only social media, if you still want to call it that, that we're really looking at. I know that's probably the wrong answer for Business 284 when you did the whole check, but we don't do that. That's, social, of course. We want people to be professional when they're in work, but we don't check that.
No, Hannah and Marion, I'm not sure. We just had Lee Gordon from Mercury Marine or Brunswick Corporation talk about branding, and maybe not until there's a much larger issue at bay that they would really dive into some of that social media if there was a risk to the organization beyond that. So, all right, so we know how to apply. Hannah, Marion, Christina, I think you might be able to add a little bit, but can you talk a little bit about how an internship versus a co-op might work within a manufacturing organization?
And I'm happy to touch on this one as well. We do have co-ops.
Okay,
too.
you give us the recruiting spiel, Christina, and then Hannah and Marion might be able to give maybe what their experience was.
Yes, for sure. So recruiting side, interns and co-ops. Interns typically 3 months or more. They can get extended. Co-ops, they actually take a semester off of school and work 6 to 8 months for us. So full-time work, 40 plus hours a week, hopefully 40 hours a week for them. But it is just an extended period where they can get the investment of that real-time work. Internships do, you're working the full time over the summer as well, but again, you have a shorter period to get trained, do the work, and then, hand that off as well. So just recruiting perspective, that's the quick definition for anyone.
Yeah, it's this is exactly the experience that I've had. So I was an intern at Oshkosh Corporation, and I worked full-time during the summer, and then I had the opportunity to work part-time during the semester, 20 hours per week. At Mercury, we also had both interns as well as co-ops. So in the supply chain organization at Mercury Marine, typically they have mostly co-op positions, and you get a project assigned that you can work on for that full time that you're there. You take a semester off, plus sometimes the summer as well, and you have full-time responsibilities just like a full-time employee. And my experience has always been in that the co-ops were treated the same way as full-time employees were, not of any lesser value. So I did want to touch upon Dr. Godfrey's question a little bit, because I want to talk to you about from a manager's perspective. I have to say that I, as a manager, I do look at Facebook. I don't have Facebook myself, which is great because I can go on Facebook and I can see everything that is public, right? So when I look a person up and that person does not have the appropriate privacy settings, there's a lot of information that you can see about people, and it's all about branding. And all I can say is just be careful what outsiders can see about you. Because again, when you're looking for a job, different people do different, have different approaches. I, as a manager, I do look at Facebook, and when I see something really, really inappropriate, that resume is gonna it's gonna end up in the wrong file. I'm being 100% honest.
That's a very interesting perspective. My partner does not have a lot of social media, and it's for that reason, because they're just not value added is what his standpoint is on that. And it is, you make sure that those privacies are locked down like nobody's else. That's an interesting perspective from a recruiting standpoint versus a hiring manager standpoint. And you have a little different investment into what that process is and who that individual is too. So wonderful. Brittany is asking, what's the #1 tip you have for those doing an internship? So that's, we can say #1 tip that you have for those doing an internship or co-op in their first experience, and then maybe if you can also add a tip about searching for, #1 tip when they're searching for that co-op or internship.
I can kick us off here. So doing an internship, we just had our final presentations. So our interns and co-ops put on a presentation to leadership and the other students as well of what they did during our time here, as we have co-ops that'll be leaving us in a month. And our VP of manufacturing jumped on the call, and the best thing that he said to these students are, don't be afraid to try something new. Some students are just so scared that they want to do their work, they want to do it correctly. They don't want to, try to push the bounds on, something new, creative, or innovative. So don't be afraid to, try something new. Don't be afraid to try. Don't be afraid to fail. As long as you're failing fast and it's not a huge mistake to the company, if you don't try it, you don't know type thing. Of course, stay within your bounds. Don't go, too extreme with that, but also, ask the questions to make sure you're, doing things the proper way. Just ask questions to know how they're working. And then we always tell them, get uncomfortable with being uncomfortable. That's going to happen your entire internship or co-op. Just get used to that, because everything's not going to come natural. Everything's not going to be something you already knew or learned in school, and that's where you actually learn.
And to add to that, I think that was along a very similar path I was going. I always tell people, enter every activity without giving that mental recognition to the possibility of defeat, meaning that you really want to concentrate on your strengths, obviously your weaknesses as well. We always want to improve those, but really concentrate where you have your strengths, on your powers, and instead of your problems, because that's really going to get you to where you want to go in life. So, I mean, obviously you want to work on your weaknesses as well. I don't want to say who cares about your weaknesses. Obviously, you're going to keep those in your kind of back pocket, but truly figure out, what are you wanting to do and what are you passionate about, because that'll get you the furthest.
Most internships have some sort of a formal structure and review process in place. If that is not the case, the one thing that I would recommend is that you seek that out, so that you constantly get feedback from your supervisor, from your mentor. If you don't have a mentor, ask for a mentor, because sometimes it can simply happen that it's unintentional, that nobody was assigned to you, and sometimes it may not be as formal and not as structured. Make sure that you also get that constant feedback, just to see how you're doing, and so that there's no surprises at the end of the internship. You're thinking you're doing great, and then at the end of the internship, you're getting a review that you were not expecting, right? So
I agree, Marion, with you. I always thought, to me, going into my first internship, I hated feedback. But to your point, I think everyone should be open to feedback, and be able to receive that feedback as well, in a way that you can take that and kind of turn around and say, okay, now how can I improve as well, if there was a weakness that needed to be addressed.
Marion, I think what you said about it's usually built into the process, and I think that's the cool thing about manufacturing. Manufacturing is all about a process. So generally there's processes for everything. Processes for finding a mentor, processes for getting feedback, processes for this. And so that's really one of the cool areas about manufacturing. And when we look at students that have generally been in certainly mid to large size organizations, there are processes in place for that mentorship, for that display of strengths and outcomes. And then we certainly see that in those smaller organizations as well. It's just sometimes there's more of a generalistic view of that in those smaller organizations. So great. Students, any other questions out there while we come back to Dr. Godfrey's question? Have you ever felt that your skills were being underutilized? Oh, it got a little wonky for a second on me. Have you ever felt that your skills were being underutilized? And then how did you address that situation when they were underutilized?
I wouldn't say that I was in a position where my skills were underutilized, but with my international background and with languages that I speak, I was managing suppliers on the international side. Actually, was not managing as many international suppliers as I actually did later in the process, because people realized, well, this guy speaks German, so he actually can work with these suppliers. Well, that guy speaks French, so he can work with our suppliers located in this and this area. So eventually roles and responsibilities were transitioned to me. So yes, maybe underutilized is the right word, but pretty soon it was pretty natural through the work that I have delivered. Seeing the results, with my international background that I was able to achieve. Hey, the company realized, we can take advantage of that. So that is one example that I could think of.
Yeah, I can't think of any that were underutilized. I would say just, coming into AMCOR, now it's been a few years, but not that they were underutilized, but that, if you're new, if you're an intern, sometimes your skill set is just not known to the entire team. So just being, open to sharing that, for example, UWO has a really great class with QBA. I know a lot of people hate going through that one, creating macros, and, I was like, hey, I know how to do this, and it helped us with an entire process, save so much time, but that's not something that HR typically utilizes all of the time. So it's just letting your skills be known to your team, and then they can find ways that you can, help with their process.
Christina, that's a really interesting point. And students, I think it's really important, especially if you have any emphasis certificates or other random courses that maybe just fit in differently. Like they may know that you are supply chain or engineering, but don't know that you maybe have an IS certificate or a minor or something of that nature. So really showcasing and sharing that on LinkedIn, but also within your team once you're hired.
Yes, and speaking of courses in education, at least when I was going through the supply chain program at UW Oshkosh, the manufacturing planning and control class is very, very similar to the APICS basics of supply chain management course. I think it's almost identical. If you take the first exam of the CPIM series, after that MPC class, it's basically the same material. It's huge. It's absolutely huge on your resume. When you can, as a student, say, I passed my first CPIM exam, it's a major differentiator. Thank you for that, Dr.
Oh, yay, Dr. Godfrey, yes. Hannah, I have a quick question because I'm scouring on LinkedIn because that's what I do as well. I see that you have a mechanical engineering internship under Pierce. Can you talk a little bit, I feel like we hit on the supply chain, which kudos to supply chain, but can you talk a little bit about that engineering perspective and that internship and maybe how that led to another opportunity or what that maybe looked like?
Yes, absolutely. So I ended up actually prior to Pierce working at a different company up in De Pere called Bellmark as a technical assistant, which was, if you've ever seen like the flexible packaging, I essentially was engineering the different packaging for like fruit snacks, like some of those like quick trip cups, things like that. And from there, my aspirations were really to work with vehicles, and Pierce being local instead of having to move basically out to Detroit or somewhere else for manufacturing in automotive. I ended up moving to Pierce and I loved it. Essentially, when I was there, how they had it set up, and this could be totally off base now, being how many years later, but essentially how they had it set up there was you got to be in a group of probably 5 or 6 different interns, and you got to work in each of their different manufacturing, I guess, departments within engineering. So out on their assembly floor, they had each of the different parts of the actual fire trucks set up in engineering. So you could be a part of their pumper, you could be a part of their aerial group, all of the different cab, fab, everything like that. And you get to go through each engineering group and essentially work with the engineers that sat in those different groups. So you got to learn plumbing, electrical, how the aerials were set up on the engineering side. And that's just really high level. You got to kind of work out in manufacturing as well to see what they were making in research and design as well over at their other plant. And from there, my supervisors at the time were very open to me moving into supply chain because I did realize, you know, engineering was really cool, but I really wanted to have a business background. So I thought, you know, I'm going to go for my 2-year degree for mechanical engineering at UW-Platteville, and then also get my supply chain degree. And from there, he essentially said, hey, I have an opportunity for you to move over to our assembly plant and operations. So I essentially went over and sat in their, I guess you could call it their fabrication of their cabs, and got to sit out with their 2 leads out on the floor and learn everything operations, which I just fell in love with. You got to work on lean projects, Six Sigma, 5S, different projects that were going on within their operations facilities. So I thought that was a great opportunity. And from there, I just really loved it. And having that mechanical engineering background, you can kind of dissect things a little bit differently than, I guess, I mean, I don't want to say a traditional business major, but having kind of that mindset of how things work together as a process as well really fed into the supply chain and operations field that I ended up going into.
Great point. Marion, I'm going to ask from a supply chain professional, can you talk a little bit about how your role currently, but maybe even in the past, interfaced with other majors? Like, how do you interface with marketing? How do you, even now or in the past, how do you interface a little bit with HR? I think we see that through Christine and how she's recruiting for some of them, but how do you also interface with IS or the management, individuals that maybe have a management degree? How does your role interface with those other majors and other professionals?
Yes, yeah, excellent question, and I can say very, very much so. You know, you really can't live in your own supply chain, your own purchasing silo, because you really have to understand how the whole company works and how all the systems work together, and how your actions are going to impact other people, right? Sometimes you have to swallow a tough pill in order for the greater benefit of the company, right? And this is why it's so important to understand other facets as well. So I double majored. I also have a degree, majored in finance. Supply chain and finance go really hand in hand, right? When you, for example, think about purchasing and how you pay your suppliers, right? You know, do you pay? Do you try to pay as late as possible, or are you going to pay early and get a discount, right? Has a huge impact on your cash flow, right? So really, really strong connection there. With the salespeople too. Actually, I learn a lot from our salespeople because they deal with people like myself, right? So we actually learn from each other, and it's really really important to do that too. But you really have to have a really good understanding and really strong connection with the other departments, and that is another thing that I recommend to you too for your internships in a manufacturing environment. Reach out to other departments as well, and you know, ask questions that you may not really understand how they relate to your job.
Wonderful point. So we have less than 6 minutes if we want to wrap up within an hour and be sensitive of everybody's evening and our time. Are there any final words that you would have for the UW Oshkosh students that are considering manufacturing at perhaps a first career option, or as they're moving on to thinking about maybe an internship in a certain area. So what advice do you have for our students, UW Oshkosh, any major, and about manufacturing?
The number one advice that I have for anyone is, if you don't ask, you don't get. And I tell that to every single person that I work with, that works for me, because it's really true. When I was an intern at Oshkosh Corporation, no one came to me and said, "Hey, Marion, would you like to go to China? Hey, Marion, would you like to go to New Zealand? Hey, Marion, would you like to go to Australia?" Right? It was really making a case. Obviously, you have to show your work and demonstrate what you're capable of and what the benefits are. But with some of the processes that we implemented and being able to go to the facilities and implement them there was extremely beneficial. I showed that to my supervisors, and I asked, well, would it make sense to go there? Sure, yeah. So had I not asked, it's a very extreme example, right? And I'm not saying that all of you are going to go to China, New Zealand, Australia during your internships, but that is the experience that I had. And if you don't ask, you will not get. And what is the worst thing that people can do? They say no.
To add to what Marion said as well, I always mention that you should really prioritize proactivity, as well as realize that opportunities don't necessarily happen. That you intentionally have to create them. Similar to what Marion said, you have to make it known that you want to move in the direction that you want to move. People cannot read your mind, especially, your manager might know you a lot or think, hey, these are a lot of the strengths that you have, but they don't know exactly where you want to go with your career to have those opportunities come to you.
Yeah, great points that both of you made. I would also say, as you're looking to get into an internship or co-op, do your research, know about the company that you're talking with, because they may stand for something completely different than your values, or maybe you're really aligned. So I think that's a really important part that's the first way that you're going to be successful in your internship of, knowing what you're getting into, which goes with Marion's, asking those questions. Whatever you don't ask, you're not going to know. But do your research, so at least you're getting, part of the way there before you dive head in.
Well, thank you all very, very, very much for your time. We do have one question, Christina. You can answer this. Do you like color on a resume, or do you prefer black and white? And then I guess Marion or Hannah, if you're hiring individuals, that's your preference. You can chat or say that in if you have a preference one way or another. I'm sure it's personal, but my guess is that there's probably a process involved of what you like.
Yeah, so you can ask 100 recruiters, and everyone is going to have a different opinion on this. I would say, don't make it crazy color. The header, sure, that's great. And also do not put your picture on your resume as well. That's the first thing we do not like to see, not because that's, mean of the picture, but totally just don't do it in our perspective, not professional in the, US type standards. Of course, globally, it's different around the world, but just recommending here in the Midwest especially. But not blaring color. Don't put it all over. Don't get your whole thing yellow or anything like that. Yes, I'm a former Titan too, so I want to, rep all of that, but don't go crazy with it. I would say the biggest thing is keep your format, keep it, concise. Don't have white space all on one side or the bottom top. Keep the formatting concise.
Yeah, and to add to that, I would say color is doable where it fits. Like she just mentioned, don't have your whole thing color-coded rainbow colors. I think that's just distracting. And recently, I think a really cool idea that I've seen on some intern resumes that I've seen in the past couple months as we're actively looking are links to different projects that you've had or even websites. I have thought that has been the coolest thing, where people are actually able to have you go and research their website and click out and see what the different projects or things that they have created. It's kind of like an extended resume almost, but in a clear, concise format other than just your LinkedIn. I think that's been a really cool ad that I've seen some applicants have on their resume in the last couple months.
Nothing, Marion, on the hiring side for the resume. Just get one, right?
Yes.
Thank you all very, very much for your time. Students have 3 awesome former Titans that are here to help you and to make strong connections with you in the manufacturing industry. They are all very successful in their roles. I know them to be very open and supportive and developmental, and it goes back to, like, if you don't ask, what is they going to say? So it's asking each and every one of them, would they be on this panel? And for that, I'm very thankful that you served the years. So wonderful. We'll stand for a little bit for those that are able, and for the rest, you're welcome to go and enjoy your evening. Dr. Godfrey, you're on. Any questions from you?
No, thank you very much. It's good to see you. I just saw Marion a couple of weeks ago at Lowe's, and Hannah, good to see you again too. And
Yes,
and thank you to all everybody being on the call tonight. Have a great night.
Yes, you too.
Thanks.
Have a great night. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for inviting me. I really appreciate it. It's been great.
Yeah, great insight on the manufacturing industry. So this was very helpful. Thank you.
Yes, good to see you again, Marion.
Yes, thanks for setting this up too, Chelsea.
Absolutely. Rich was helpful too. I just did the forward email and the talking part. Communication might be one of my strengths. There we go.
Oh, this is Chelsea. She did amazing.
Yeah. All right. Have a great night, all.